We just get this recording here. It's September 7th already for any of you who missed it. September's here, August is gone. I think we're just waiting for JC to get on. If JC, let's check if he's on yet. All right, he should be getting on soon. But anyway, good morning, everyone. Happy September 7th. JB here. JC hopefully will be joining us soon. A lot of familiar faces, some new ones. Let's see who we got. Got Chad, got Brian, got Ben, got Alex. Looks like some new folks. Paul, Mark, Glenn. Thanks, guys. John, and a couple iPhone guests. Well, as you know, this is our monthly Ask Us Anything. We got a lot of crazy stuff going on with the wonderful administration that's guiding our country, or a lack of guidance. I guess there's a lack of guidance right now. Let's take just a minute and bow our heads for our comrades in Afghanistan who didn't make it back, and offer thanks for all of our service folks who are helping the cause. Okay. All right, so I'm going to launch this thing without JC, and I want to make the best use of your time. As you know, this is JB and JC from FFL Consultants. Most of you we talk to regularly, some we haven't talked to in a while, looking at the list, but you know, we're here for you. What is FFL Consultants doing? We do it all. We do it from training and support for FFLs, getting their licensing, going through the licensing process, through all the way through to the revocation and warning areas where we don't like to see you guys, but that's our primary product. It's just helping customers and clients, FFL, stay out of trouble with the ATF. JC and I are on the road. We've been on the road every week since March, since we got back on the road with clients, doing audits, checking books, checking firearms, and answering that phone whenever you guys call. Let me do a check here. Firearms, Fred, you see our screen okay? And you're hearing us okay? And
yes.
All right, cool. I get the thumbs up. So today we're going to run through some, basically we do the same thing every month. Federal ATF updates that are critical to our business, to the industry. Our goal is always to help you guys get it right the first time, whether it be basically in compliance on the A&D side, the transfer side, and if you're an importer or manufacturer with those businesses as well. Let's have fun today. Let's make it interactive. If you got some background noise, mute it, but otherwise keep your mics on. Let's have a conversation and make sure we get you guys the right answers to all of your questions. And this is confidential. We do make the recording available, so we don't really get too deep into any personal situations, but please feel free to ask your questions or put them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, if you want to do so that way. All right. So we're going to go through the Biden administration's current events. We call it current events now. Everything's changing so rapidly with this crazy administration. And somebody does have a little background noise, whoever that is. Maybe you can just turn your mic off and mute yourself. And so we'll go through the Biden administration updates. We'll talk about what's affecting us today. We'll talk about August, another great month for firearms transfers. We're celebrating Texas becoming the 21st constitutional carry state. Outstanding. And then obviously the ATF inspection, good stuff, bad stuff, the ugly stuff we're seeing and hearing, and how you can prevent yourself from falling victim to an ATF IOI.
I told him, to be easy on us, try to don't do them at once. Right.
I may ask that somebody does have some background noise. If you can mute your computer, whoever's got background noise, please. Thank you.
Okay, good. I had more info. I'll send you on a sheet. No problem.
Trying to figure out who that might be.
I think it's Glenn.
Glenn, we're going to mute Glenn for him. Let's see. There we go. All right. Thank you, guys. All right, let's talk about our not so friendly friend here, Biden, who says he's everything but that he's not. This has gone crazy. JC and I have been trying to follow this weekly with the NSSF and channels we have open through Washington. The bottom line is the Biden administration is not going to get their nominee any further than he is today. So I think we're all convinced that David Chapman is not going to be any place close to leading this ATF organization. Therefore, the administration is moving furiously with end-around programs and executive orders and other actions that can impact gun control in the firearms industry. The first of which we'll talk about is today, which goes into effect today, has been as of 12:01 this morning, was the sanction on all importation of Russian ammunition and firearms for any importation Form 6 forms that have not been already submitted and approved and authorized through Homeland Security. Hey, JC's on. How are you, JC?
Hey, y'all.
Welcome to the game. We're just getting started, John. So
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Sorry about that.
oh, no problem. But this came out of the blue. I mean, we knew about the sanction as being a possibility. We didn't think it was going to run as fast as it did. But as of obviously, you all know, as of today, and we're going to talk about the impact this is having already. Most of you already know a lot of ammo does come from the Russian states. Basically, the brands we are associated with Russia are Wolf and Tula, basically come out of the same factory, and Barnaul and Zastafa firearms. But the biggest issue here is the run up on ammunition. We were out traveling the last couple of weeks, and not only did we have small firearms dealers, small FFLs without any big buying power, suffering from the drought that we had in ammunition from last year. But now this is going to just be a secondary effect on what was already occurring. And more than anything else, we are seeing a lot of hoarding and run on ammunition, no matter where it is, for any of the more common calibers. I think most of you already know that the factories got up and running with 9mm, 45, 10, and 40 for the most part for handguns, some 38 special, some 380. But the factories had to catch up with demand and went after the mass production of the more common calibers. The hunting calibers, as you all know, are very, very slim in supply and mostly not available anywhere. So that's just a whole different conversation for the hunting industry, unfortunately. But I was talking to someone today, and Alex, is it okay if I pick on you?
Yeah, John, go ahead. What you got?
All right. Yeah. No, we were talking this morning just about this whole Wolf and Russian ammo, basically embargo, sanction. And you're hearing on the ground that Wolf actually has a substantial amount of Form 6 approvals for the next 18 months. Was I right?
Yeah, that is correct. They have Form 6 approval for what they predict is a market availability for the next year and 8 months, but that's based on their ammo amount that is available on those Form 6s. So say people start buying more from them, the amount of that time frame is going to be reduced. But if people aren't buying as much, meaning dealers and wholesalers aren't buying as much, that could last a little longer. But the price aspect of that, as we discussed earlier, JB, has completely changed, which is going to cause an effect for dealers and wholesalers alike.
Yeah, and the problem being approved Form 6s means for the, and they list that for the permanent importation, but that typically is specific to basically a purchase order, a quantity of ammunition previously approved to be imported. Am I right, JC, on that?
Yes,
Form 6.
that's correct.
Yeah, so it's not an open floodgate forever. It's based on an order placed, and you got to understand the technical jargon behind all of that to understand it. But yeah, this is we see a lot of panic buying. We had a lot of calls last week from dealers just asking what we thought, and we thought the same thing. That you can read basically online going into this, and if you're hooked into the NSSF and get the newsletters as well, you'll get some direction there, some industry direction. But the bottom line is, this is going to hamper ammunition supply for at least the next year. And I think it's going to be 18 months because it can flow over pretty easily without any additional action or the same action by Biden to extend it, the administration. So what does it mean? Is it truly a shortage right now? Well, the shelves might still have ammunition on it, but based on what we've seen, the prices have gone up. We saw last week approaching Friday pricing 20%, 25% higher. And today, that was what sparked a conversation this morning with myself and Alex. Ammunition for the same steel case, 7.62 is up around 35, almost 40% higher.
Yeah, it's came pretty close to doubling from what I saw this morning on that when I was on the phone with Wolf directly.
Nice about this one is it's got parallax.
JC, anything else you can add on the
Close ranges.
any opinion on this?
No, that pretty much covers it. I mean, right now what it comes down to is importation, and it really has a lot to do with the brass as well as the low explosive that's utilized to manufacture the primer as well. So, and most of the U.S. ammunition market is really focused on that 223 and 9mm because those are the two calibers that law enforcement, military, and other government entities use the most. So.
Right. And and Alex and I were talking this morning, just talking about what's the call it the futures of the ammo futures, and we didn't expect pricing to jump between Friday and today by that extra 10-20% from Wolf, specifically Wolf USA. So that just goes to show they must have had a tremendous amount of orders placed on the announcement being published this morning.
And JB, after I got off the phone with you, I had called them to double check the accuracy of those pallet prices, and they said the order right now is 1 to 2 weeks out for order fulfillment, which I'm guessing means they don't have anything ready to ship at this time.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the other thing we were just hitting on is, we've kind of lost conversation about the pandemic with everything else going on, Afghanistan, the southern border. But this pandemic is actually continuing to impact worldwide supply chain, mining operations, factory production operations. There's 3 cities, now there's 3 cities in China. I think we spoke last month about 1 city in China, but there's 3 now shut down for production, factory production, which can include, some parts and pieces like we know, furnish the firearms manufacturing industry here in the U.S. Just because it says made in the U.S. doesn't mean the triggers and the hammers and the firing pins and the slides were actually made here in the U.S. They do come from many overseas factories. So we hope it's not a replay from last year, but it sure feels like it's going in that direction.
It's glass.
Anybody else have any comments or thoughts on the ammunition situation today? Any questions? Well, let's move on to the whole pistol brace, the Honey Badger, the ATF pistol brace ruling, open comments ends tomorrow. So if you haven't returned a reply to your congressman or senator regarding your disapproval of this, I urge you to do so.
Got a sunshade if you ever need it.
We've worked with a lot of dealers, FFLs over the last 2 months, putting paragraphs, all it takes is a paragraph, putting information together. Hey, Rob, thanks for joining us today. But anyway, putting your opinion out there to convince your representative to argue this go forward bill. Right now, it's got a lot of opposition. They're forecasting 11 million NFA possible NFA applications based on AR pistols primarily that have been sold with supporting Arm-Brace, and just doesn't make sense. I know there was at last count there was over 16,000 open replies sent in, so that's remarkable. I don't think we've ever seen that many on any single issue recently. So that was a good push, and we feel pretty strongly that this will not make it through the House. I'm sorry, well, may make it through the House, will not make it through the Senate. Again, there's just so much opposition to it right now. So that's the update. We don't have any other update on that. There's no timing on this. I think there's, JC, I don't know, is it 60 days or 90 days they have to act on this as of the close tomorrow?
Yeah, probably like 3 months ago. We talked.
Pretty sure we need a decision, so
Yeah.
And
we'll keep you guys updated on anything we hear there. Okay.
yeah, just stuff.
And then the last issue that we are happy.
I have moved here.
Hey, John, can you mute John Weaver?
Is that John Weaver? Yeah, let me go find him.
Yeah, fun stuff.
So actually, our house in California closed today,
Well, good.
and
Okay, there we go. Thank you, John Weaver. All right, Fair Access to Banking Act, which most of you may have forgotten about, but this is the what we're hoping gets pushed through, which will help our prevent our big banks from canceling different industry service providers like gun dealers. And the banks that we are focused on for this bill is Wells Fargo, Citibank, basically all the big banks that have selectively, in effect, canceled gun dealers and jumped on the gun control bandwagon, so to speak, selectively, and which is totally unfair and biased and discriminatory. So basically, the bill is all about Bill HR 1729, all about preventing discrimination to select industries. And again, we just think this is an end around move by the Biden administration for the last year that we've been hearing about it to impact gun control because they can't get straightforward bills passed. So thankfully we have regional banks. We actually have we've partnered with a bank out in California just because we've had so many calls and inquiries. There's your community banks, but like I said, there's a bank. You can check out our preferred partners page on our website. And if you need support or assistance, you'll find yourself getting your accounts getting frozen or your merchant services getting cut off or stalled or frozen, as has happened in recent months. There's always a transition, so plan ahead on this. If you don't hear more about this bill getting passed, we can only assume there'll be more selective discrimination that we just don't hope for, obviously. Anybody getting cut off with merchant services? Anybody in the audience? Has this impacted you at all?
No.
Cool. Okay. And it doesn't have to be cut off. It could just be an increase in pricing, could be additional service fees. So got any of those issues, just go ahead and give us a ring. JC, you did some analysis. We saw the August numbers for background checks come out. We had 1.3 million with a second best August in history, right? Since 1968.
Yep. Numbers came out. We were actually at 2.715223 for August for NICS background checks. We're down 13% year over year, which is to be expected. 2020 was the anomaly, right? And then month over month, we're down 6% to last month. So just slightly down. It's basically where we expected it to be.
Yeah, and I mean, last year was such a crazy year, good year, crazy year, still impacting us with all types of supply chain issues, demand issues, availability issues, politics issues. But the good news, obviously, is that we had the best, second best August. And being down just isn't, I say being down isn't a negative with the fact that being down is still up over historical months. So as long as supplies are there, I think we'll have demand. That's the big challenge. All right, like I said, we're going to celebrate Texans carrying or concealed carry, constitutional carry approved. Very excited. Every state that moves in this direction helps the cause, helps the Second Amendment movement, and helps more folks in Washington understand what Americans really want to do regarding firearms. So the reason we bring this up is that now you may have, we might see a surge, and we actually have. I was in Texas last week. We actually had a lot of folks asking and calling. I was at a pawnbroker, and they were calling, asking how this affects their purchase of a firearm. Obviously, it was a lot of first-time gun buyers calling and asking what they had to do, what they have to bring in to fill out an application, what it takes to actually purchase a firearm. So it's amazing that this type of news actually wakes up the sleepy, I don't want a gun type of folks and says, oh, now I can do this. Maybe it's a lot easier. And those are the type of calls the store is getting, which was pretty encouraging. One problem is supply. It was a one-stop pawnbroker, and their purchasing power isn't fabulous. So I provided alternative means for purchasing. We hooked them up with some dealers to become a dealer rather with some distributors, and hopefully their supply chain flows better than they were before. So it was a very eventful day and encouraging day for them. But what you'll see now is a lot of, maybe, hopefully, a lot more of folks purchasing online, Texas residents ordering from you if you've got an online store, or if you're using Gun Buyer, Gun Broker, or another online firearms platform to sell your firearms. Hopefully that all kicks in and we continue this trend. All right, JC, we're into the meat of this. The good, the bad, the ugly inspections we've been dealing with, and the information we've been receiving from folks we haven't been visiting, but we have around the country being inspected. Just quickly, our update is as of today, there's 4 ongoing, 2 inspections closed within the last 2 weeks. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. And then we are seeing the trend, although it's not verbalized from anybody official. We're definitely seeing a trend on revisits to those FFLs that are in warning status or close to revocation, which means usually a second warning letter over the last 3 to 5 years. So those are the folks we're seeing visited right now, with the exception of 1, which is just a random audit, random inspection, hasn't been inspected in 5 years.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about being proactive versus reactive. And this is just based on the feedback we're getting from our FFLs we're talking with. Some of these guys, when you get into an inspection, when you get into the inspection process with the ATF on site, and you're one of our clients, we talk to you every day. We talk to you from the time the ATF shows up, tell you how to conduct yourself, how to negotiate with them, how to relate with them through the process, how the process is going to proceed. And then we do a recap at the end of each day to figure out, okay, what can we do between today and tomorrow to make the outcome better? And we've learned a lot over the last several years to impact that outcome. But here's the one thing we are definitely seeing this month. So the ATF inspectors, again, for those folks who have either, let's ask first, anybody just speak up if you've had any type of warning in the past, warning letter, any type of action plan. Has anybody out there had to ever submit anything like that to the ATF as a result of an inspection?
No.
That's 1 no. We got a lot of people on. Anybody out there? Anybody ever have to do an action plan?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Negative.
No.
And hey, Randy. Hey, guys. Chad, nice to see you guys.
No.
Well, let's tell you what that's all about. And I'm gonna. So we're gonna see this next. Let me put this line up here for you first. So when you have an ATF inspection, obviously, they come in, they do the firearms count. The first thing they'll do is count the guns, compare it to your A&D book, make sure there's nothing missing and no extras, and all the serial numbers are right and everything's perfect, right? And then they move into the paperwork process. As a result, and they're looking at all your 4473s and attachments so either since the last visit or at least the last 12 months, prior 12 months. But at the end of that inspection, whether you have a good inspection, a bad inspection, or mediocre inspection, whatever the results are, the last paragraph includes this. It says, any future violations, either repeat or otherwise, could be viewed as willful and may result in the revocation of your license. Please ensure that future compliance is achieved. Again, that is a standard closing on their report of activities that close your inspection. Again, whether it's a good inspection, bad inspection, mediocre inspection. And what this allows the ATF to do is come back in and re-inspect you to find willful negligence and to find willful activities not in alignment with their past recommendations. So on every one of the visits we've had in the last several weeks where there has been where an FFL is in warning status, one of the first things we've noticed is that the inspector is pulling out and has with them the prior report summary. Will it be a long or short list of violations, the ROV, report of violations? They are focusing intensely on things you said you were going to do last time they visited. So our best advice to you is if you've had a visit, whether it be, again, good, bad, or not, good, bad, or moderate, pull your last visit report and see what was said and see if there was any agreements to or any recommendations by the ATF inspectors back then, the investigators, to do anything differently. Not doing that can be willful disregard for their recommendations. So that's the first thing we've noticed they're going after. For example, if an FFL was missing signatures or wasn't hitting a box for proceeding, a delay turns into a proceed, or maybe they weren't getting signatures in the transfer box 36 or 37, whatever it was, last year. They're going after those specific failures from the past to see if they've been fixed or if they are reoccurring. And if they're reoccurring, the hammer is coming down pretty hard. So make sure, if anything, you have tended to past commitments and issues needing to be addressed.
I will tell you that of the inspections that we have seen over the last few weeks, they are definitely focusing even on the minor issues. I've had 2 FFLs in the past week that have had what historically been what we would consider relatively minor violations, ones that would not create a scenario of adverse action. And now they're getting warning letters and warning conferences. So even for the most minor of violations, basically the direction that's been given is they need to tighten up and make sure that FFLs are following all of the rules. So if you've had adverse action in the past or a report of violations, even if back then it was minor and you were not issued any type of warning letter or warning conference, today that may change. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have some more examples in a few minutes here. We'll get to the questions, but hey, so anyway, what can you do today? What should you do today? Number one, conduct an inventory, do an all-gun inventory. We just went through one of our clients not being inspected, called to say he had 28 guns missing. He did an inventory. He hasn't done an inventory since January of 2020, believe it or not. And the reason was not so good. The reason was, well, we've had turnover, which just got out of control. We've been trying to catch up with everything else. We know we screwed up some things during the crazy run on guns last year. But long story short, they had 7,300 transactions in the last 18 months. They're missing 28 guns. So of course he's in a panic. What do I do? What should I do? And so we run through a to-do list. We give him the action plan. We hold his hand for a few days. Lo and behold, thankfully, the dealer was in Pennsylvania, is a point of contact state. Thankfully, he was able to work with a contact we had in the state police to figure out by serial numbers registered, because they register handgun sales in Pennsylvania, handgun transfers. Luckily, we got a lot of those 28 unknown firearms identified. And there was many steps beyond that. We had to have folks come in and help recreate the 4473s. You're allowed to do that, but you got to do it in a certain way. We had to create forms that they couldn't find. Again, 7,300 forms is a lot of forms, and that's a lot of transfers. Long story short, it took about 10 days. After about 10 days, we finally got down to 6 firearms missing. We fill out the appropriate theft report, missing and theft loss report. We check the right boxes. And over the course of the next few days, they were able to find 5 more guns At the end of the day, we're missing 3 guns, not 26. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, it's a bad thing to be missing any guns. But in comparison to the 7,300 transfers that he did, it was, we're saying it's acceptable, and he knows he has to take some lumps of that on that next time the ATF shows up to do an inspection. But here's the good news. He told them before they told him. And that's the trick to having a good inventory process and following the requirements of the federal firearm licensing requirements as stated by the ATF. It's okay to tell the ATF you're missing guns before they tell you, as a result of an inventory they do, that you're missing firearms or have too many firearms not acquired in your books. So that's just an ugly story from the last couple of weeks that I wanted to review, because it's kind of the worst case scenario. When I first heard there's 26 guns missing, my eyes lit up. I was like, oh my God, we don't have this call often, but we understand, and we understand we're gonna have more of these calls probably over the next few weeks as folks continue to ratchet down on what happened last year. So go ahead, JC. Oh, anybody have a question on that? Oh. And John, I'm not watching the chat box, so maybe you can do that. Again, guys, if you have questions, if you don't just want to use the chat box, feel free to do so as well. Or just speak right up. What we're seeing lately on all these inspections we're doing, what JC and I are doing at least 1 or 2 a week around the country, and we're seeing a lot of, we've told people, don't retain and file your miscellaneous paperwork, business records, sales receipts, copies of IDs with your 4473s. Because just like we do, the ATF inspector can audit against the attachments you include in your file system with your 4473s. And yes, we do find a lot. We spend the time to cross-reference dates of birth, expiration dates on IDs. We make sure month and day and month aren't transformed, which happens a lot. We find just lots of miscellaneous small errors. It could be an apartment number on an address, missing from an address that's either on an ID and not listed on a form, line 10. There's all these little pieces, middle names, middle initials, that allow you, and if you provide the resources to ATF to audit against, you'll be cited for those violations, and again, those statutory violations of law, and you can be cited for that, which can impact your license. So if you're going to retain all of that paperwork, and a lot of you want to, your pawnbrokers love to have ID because they're repeat customers and they can get in touch with people, etc. Just do a parallel file. Have another file cabinet by month and year, where you go ahead and file that miscellaneous paperwork. I found serial numbers transposed between a sales receipt and a 4473. And I'd have to then stop and go back to the A&D log and see which number was correct and get that corrected. So again, the ATF's just going to identify those issues and errors versus what we do. We actually correct them, point them out to you, so you pass your next inspection with, as we say, flying colors. JC, I miss anything on that piece of it? I think we cover that frequently, so okay.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Nope, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Signatures and dates. I think I talked a little bit about this. We're finding out with a lot of delays, there was a lot of delays over the last year because of just the volume of transfers being completed. And I'm finding on my inspections anyway, a lot of recertifications not signed, whereas somebody had to come back, they got delayed, they came back 3, 4, 5 days later, and we forgot to recertify on line 31 and get the new signature and date, confirming that nothing has changed since they first completed their transfer application and we submitted the next, the background check. So that's a big one. That's a critical one. And I'm going to mention this. If we talk on the phone one-on-one, we talk about this issue a couple different ways. But what you have to do when somebody forgets to recertify is you've got to make a copy of that page 3. You've got to send it to that person if they don't want to come in and actually complete it and correct it themselves in person. You got to send that paper out. You've got to get that paper back. You've got to have it initialed and dated. and you've got to insert that and attach it with the original 4473 and show a correction. So you guys know that's a tedious and long process you want to not go through if you don't have to. So again, do the second and third verification, second set of eyes before a transfer, have a second employee review the form, make sure it's complete before you hand over that firearm. Finding a lot of those, more than expected lately.
A couple of things, you know, and before JB continues on here, I'm seeing a lot of FFLs that they'll do the double check. And in many cases, the double check is really good. They have a second person who verifies everything is correct before the sale proceeds, or that physical transfer of the firearm occurs. And that's really essential, is that double check. But I'm also finding, you know, the second person to check the 4473 is just relying on the first person to have done their job. And what's key is to reiterate to everyone, if you have somebody that's doing the double check, is to make sure they're actually reviewing it, not just initialing and moving on. You know, I visit a lot of FFLs that have 3, 4, even up to 5 checks before that 4473 gets filed, and they still miss stuff. And the key really is to get that correction made before the firearm gets transferred. So it's just very important to reiterate to whoever that person is that's doing the second check or the double check that they have a real responsibility in this process. So I can't reiterate that enough. You know, having 3, 4, 5 checks before that paperwork hits the file, it's all well and good. I want to know that it was done before the gun walked out the door.
And in the worst case scenario, that night or the next morning, we had an FFL on the verge of revocation for the last 3 years. Deathly afraid of his next ATF inspection, which actually closed a couple weeks ago. I may have started talking about him last call, but he was ecstatic to go through his closing conference and his repeat inspector, the same investigator who was here 18 months ago, looked him in the eye and said, "Why are you so good?" Not why, he said, "How are you so good in your process?" And the FFL said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, something's going on here." I mean, very suspiciously said, "Something's going on here. You can't be this good." I'm paraphrasing, but that was almost a quote. And the FFL was just put a big smile on his face and said, "We've improved." And that's the kind of conversation we want you to have with your next ATF inspector, especially if you've been in a situation where things weren't so good in the past. And to JC's point, they have a double verification and process before a transfer is sent out, is given and allowed to leave the store. And this place did over 5,500 transfers last year. And they said, JB said, if you guys weren't beating us up and answering the phone and getting us the answers and harping on us to, you know, weekly and monthly during these calls, because we have different calls with different clients. He goes, "I don't know if we would have been here, but boy, we are celebrating. I'm taking everybody out to sushi." JC knows who I'm talking about now. And, you know, we hope it continues. I said, "You guys are great. We're really excited to have worked with you for the last 3 years." I said, "But your challenge is to keep it going." And again, they have the second set of eyes on every transfer. And then the FFL, the licensee, the responsible person is looking at those forms the next morning or the latest, maybe 2 days later if he's off for the weekend. And it was that important to him, is that much of his business that he needs to make sure he doesn't lose his license, and he doesn't want the ATF coming back anytime soon. So we thought that was a great happy ending to a very strenuous and stressful situation for a couple of years. Okay. All right.
JB, can you mute all participants?
What's that, John? Can
you mute all participants?
I can try to figure out what to do. I'm having a little control failure here, but let's just keep going. If somebody's moving around there or in the kitchen or something, just put yourself on mute if you can, please. Okay. All right. All right, next on my list here is all corrections initialed and dated. Okay, we got to talk about this one because this is coming up more and more. I think there's a little secret agenda here with our investigators. Now, in the past, we haven't seen citations, citable violations during inspection as much as we're seeing today for corrections to 4473s and or the A&D book missing a date. Okay, we're really good with signature, with the initials rather. We're really good with one line through an error. Just one line strike through what was wrong, initial and dated. And I got to throw that flag up that if you're not putting the date, that's an incomplete error correction. And just go count how many times that can happen on a form or in a stack of forms. And again, they will add up to be a long list of citable violations on a report of violations. And you just don't want to have that. So date, initial and date, both you and the customer, for any corrections made to your 4473s or the A&D. I didn't put it on here, but I'm going to throw back in again. Box 32 is what I call it the story box. That's where you write your story, keep your notes. Will it be a phone number for a customer or initials of the second person who may have reviewed the form or anything peculiar about the completion of that transfer. If it was a delay, maybe there's a little story behind it. If it was maybe it's maybe it's a kind of a transfer you thought maybe was like kind of straw purchase, maybe not, and maybe it was a gift, and you want to rate your little notes to all of those transfers in box 32. I'm seeing way too many problem forms, meaning form 4473, that I have to stop as an inspector and ask a question about. And most of the time, the FFL knows the answer or can explain it. But I said, why didn't you write that? Why didn't you put a note in box 32? Why didn't you write that down? Why didn't you write that about that problem with the ID, or why, the problem with the residential secondary supplementary address verification, whatever it was, write that note in box 32. It'll help speed. It'll help the next ATF investigator speed through the review process of your forms. I had a form that was crossed. They should have started the form over, but it had like 12 different error corrections. It was obviously a person who had a legibility problem and or maybe didn't understand the questions. Maybe had a capacity problem. And lo and behold, there was all types of signatures and dates and initials, and it was a mess. I said, why don't you redo the form? He goes, well, it was tough enough just getting this person to do this with a translator. Okay, then okay, well, wait a minute. Okay, talk about a translator. Tell me what happened. Was there a third-party witness? Was there a third witness and not just an employee of the store? What witnessing this whole event? And he went on to explain it. It was several months back. I said, why didn't you write that whole story here in box 32? Write some notes so that I, as someone reviewing this form, would understand what happened. Because I tell you, when the ATF comes in, they're going to ask all those questions. So please, let's take this form and write some notes in it, initial and date, the update as of today that you're adding these notes. So I said, that's fine. You're the employee. I said, it's going to help the ATF inspector get through this form next time around. So use box 32. All right, and let's see, let's go ahead. And the timing on the form 3310.4 and 3310.12, if you're subject to the long gun, multiple long gun reporting, 3310.4s, if you're automated with your form 4473s, congratulations, these will print out and pop up on your screen if you're using electronic software to complete your transfers. And then these forms usually just print out or ask to be sent. Well, if you print them out but don't send them, that's a complete failure. The form 3310.4 and 3310.12, multiple handgun and multiple long gun transfers, must be reported by end of business day. Next day is a violation of law. Never sending them in, which was sometimes issues we find a folder full of these sitting on someone's desk when we visit, and we say, what are these? And they say, oh, we send them in at the end of the week. Or we send them in, so-and-so sends them in, but he's out sick or he's on vacation. please have a good process in place to get these in timely and have a verification and process. We highly advise to use email or fax machine to send these in same day, by end of business day, and have a verification. It's either copy yourself on the email that gets sent or keep a sent notification in your email box, or have the fax verification and attach it to the form. Several FFLs are being accused of not sending these in timely, or not at all. So please make sure you're keeping these attached. I had a whole file not attached to the 4473s. I said to one FFL a few weeks ago, I said, where's, I kept writing little sticky notes saying we're missing 3310.4, missing 3310.4. And when we sat down midday to go over my progress on his paperwork, he says, oh, we have all those. They're in the file cabinet. I said, well, the requirements and instructions are to attach them with the form for safekeeping and longevity of record keeping. And he says, oh, I didn't know that, but the instructions were right on the form. So activity, homework, go attach them to all the respective forms.
And
So those
just
are
to,
things.
just to chime in on that, we just had an inspection occur where an FFL, the ATF is going to show up when they come in to do your inspection, and they're going to know exactly how many 3310.4s there should be. So when you submit them, they do go somewhere. They do go to somebody that enters them into a database, and they are going to verify that you have a 3310.4 for every transaction that's occurred, where there's a multiple handgun sale or a multiple rifle sale. So be aware of that. This particular FFL, the IOI came in and advised them that they were missing close to 40 3310.4s. And they were ready to do an inspection and find out whether or not they actually did all 40 of those. And guess what? He had evidence that he had submitted them. And somehow, some way, the emails got lost, and those 40 transactions did not get recorded on their report. So the IOI actually had to go through and verify everything and resubmit them. And he luckily had proof that he had submitted them in a timely manner. So know when they show up, they will know how many 3310.4s you submitted and whether or not you submitted them in a timely manner.
And then just as we say, everyone, with every transfer, every box counts. Having the right county and not the word United States, and having the a lot of folks. Somebody had Puerto Rico. They didn't know if that was a country or a city or a U.S. city, a U.S. Every box counts. Make sure your answers to every box qualify and all the right terminology required by that box. You can't leave a box blank if you don't know the answer. You've got to put something. Give us a call. Refer to your instructions. Make sure every box is filled in. Yeah. All right. So we titled this. We said, are they being picky or is this something else? Well, we're not going to tell you who they are, but you can assume who they are. And that we think there's an agenda based on the inspections we're seeing, the fact that there's no ATF directorship nominee on the table. The AG is in charge right now of the ATF. So the direction for the ATF team, field team, Washington team, Clarksburg team is coming from the Attorney General's office. So we can just leave it at that, not knowing any more fact behind that. But here's what the caution issues are. What was okay during the last inspection may not be okay in the future, as we've just given you many, many examples. We're seeing people, as we say, dinged. We're seeing them dinged on a 4473 or the A&D book for something that was okay last time around. You may have a new investigator. You may not have the same person that came on the last inspection, and hence somebody with a different agenda, somebody who wants some brownie points with their boss. And your digital process may not be compliant. I have to tell you this quick story. I visited someone in the the mid-Atlantic states, and they had a fabulous little shop, and they had a fabulous little spot, only gun dealer in town, nice little remote area. And they were super good with compliance. And I went to look at their 4473s, And they said, oh, just sit down at the computer. We use the software. We use online 4473s. I said, okay, I understand you use on the online. You have a laptop. It's all great. All the boxes are filled in, nothing left blank, etc. But I need to review them. So she said, oh, you can sit right here. I said, well, do you have a variance for electronic storage of your 4473s? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, they have to be printed. Even though you have an electronic system, they have to be printed unless you have the variance. So without panicking, I started going through the process over the next week to get a variance in place for them. Long story short, the software they were using was not compliant to house electronic 4473s according to the ATF requirements. Well, that was about 2 weeks ago, and those folks are still printing out almost 900 Form 4473s that were just stored in their computer in violation of FFL requirements and guidelines. So please, if you're doing digital, electronic storage, make sure you have the variances in place and or you're meeting the compliance requirements. And if you need those for electronic storage, give JC or myself an email. We'll send you what you need. But as far as printing and storing 4473s electronically, that has to be approved through a special ATF variance that has to be submitted and approved. Okay, I needed to say that because I don't want anybody else having to do this or getting stuck with this issue if and when the ATF shows up. All right.
And then last,
real
quick, JB, even with the electronic A&D books, there are requirements around that. The last few inspections that we've had, there have been transactions that have occurred or updates to a specific line item for a firearm, and for whatever reason, those updates or changes or corrections in the electronic A&D didn't take effect. We just had an FFL that had 28 violations as a result of it, and it wasn't their fault. It was actually the software's fault. But in the ATF's eyes, when we had the conversation with the IOI about it, they said the FFL, although it was a systemic issue and they showed us it was a systemic issue and we could see all, how it could be corrected and all those other things, they had 28 violations as a result of it because the FFL, didn't take the responsibility to go in and QA and make sure that everything was uptight. So just be aware of that, even with your just the electronic A&D, which you no longer need a variance for. Just make sure that when you're making corrections to your electronic A&D or you're transitioning to your electronic A&D, make sure that everything is working correctly. And it doesn't hurt to go in and do an audit every once in a while to make sure that transactions are being disposed, the firearms are being disposed of as a result of transactions and all of that as well, because that is happening with these systems for whatever reason. So just keep an eye on that. Make sure you're doing some quality control and quality assurance on your electronic A&Ds.
Yeah, JC, that's a must. We have another client with electronic A&D, electronic 4473s, and they didn't realize the signature capture pad was not working 100% of the time, even though it appeared to be capturing on screen in the software. It was not storing the digital signature in the system, and it was random. So again, if you're not looking QA, quality assurance, verification, if you're not checking this, spot checking it every week, you got to make sure your software is working. You hold the responsibility for there. The ATF does not care what software vendor you're using and whose fault it is, other than the FFL who is licensed to run the business. All right. So, hey, ATF shows up, guys, please give us a call, whether you're one of our primary clients, you're an ambassador, or just visiting us for the Ask Us Anything event today. Give us a call. We'll help you through any ATF inspection process. This is just my contact information. Most of you have it. We're going to get the questions in just a minute here. My email, there's our website. And ambassadors and clients, you have JC and my direct numbers, but everybody else, please call 720-336-0028 or send your inquiries to info@fflconsultants.com and we'll go ahead and get you an answer. So we got some time left here for questions. If you got it, you guys got them. If anybody else wants to stick around after the top of the hour, we'll be happy to spend another 15 minutes with you. But give us your questions. Anybody just unmute yourself and throw a question. I can't see the chat box for some reason, guys. There was a wonderful Zoom update.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what that's got to be it. I don't know why.
I don't know. I can't get to it, but
Yep.
if anybody's got a question, please unmute and just throw it at us. Yeah. Comments? Alex, we had good chatter this morning. Anything else? Oh, I got John. I'm sorry. I was able to hear. Ready? Let me run through this real quick. Question: when logging, we are seeing dealers reporting having to list both the importer and manufacturer, such as Glock/Glock, for example. This wasn't an issue before. Why now?
Because you're always, anytime that a firearm is imported, you're required by regulation to document both. For a while there was the assumption, and IOIs were making this assumption that, you know, because they knew Glock was Glock, right? They were allowing it, you know, FFLs to just go ahead and don't worry about if it was the same name. And unfortunately, they were just making up a regulation on their own. The regulation states that you must document an importer, if any. Doesn't matter if it's the same or not. So they're just being nitpicky about it now.
And being that there may be agendas out there and by certain folks to cite you for every violation, even though you think Glock is the same manufacturer, by law, it does not fill the requirements. Glock Austria is the manufacturer, Glock USA is the importer. Same thing with some Taurus, Beretta, and others. Even though they have the same name for the company, the factory company name overseas as the importer, we're just advising to meet the requirement by listing the manufacturer and the importer until further notice. It's a violation. Nobody told you you didn't have to do that. Okay. And if you
JB, can I ask a question pertaining to that really quick?
Sure.
I told you about this a while back. I specifically asked the Dallas ATF office about that because, you know, I deal a lot in Sig Sauer, and some of the older SIGs are still made overseas. I got the email that I pretty much keep with my bound book pertaining to it, that they specifically said that if it's Glock or Sig, and it's on the DOJ letterhead email saying that just writing one of them is okay. And that was
you got lucky, Alex. Yeah, you got lucky. Most of the times they won't give you that in writing. And
yeah, she gave it to me in writing via email, so I got tagged on there.
I guarantee you, if I went to FIPB and asked the same question, I'd get a different answer.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
Keep that handy. Yeah, unless you have.
Yeah, keep that handy.
Yeah, it is multiple copies.
And the rest of you, in case you have that issue or want to get that, you know, write a note to your IOI or area supervisor and ask for that determination or the allowance to do so in the way that Alex just explained. It's only specific to the FFL that received that in writing. Any of these, we call that a variance or an email exception. If somebody said you can do it, it's only you. It's not the guy down the block or your buddy, the gun dealer across town. So that's the only defense you have. Similar to this question, follow-up: how to fix the previous entries when we don't know if a certain firearm was imported and by whom? And I get this question at least once a week because people are tripping over it or watching our video or reading that email instructions we sent out on this. They're saying, how do I know? I don't have the firearm. I said, you know, you don't. It's a go forward thing for the most part, because you can't put your hands on the firearm. You don't want to call 100 customers and ask them to read the manufacturer importer off the firearm. I said, but at least fix it. Do a go forward correction with your team. Start doing it and put a little note in your file someplace that says, as of this date, we reviewed requirements and started doing it right. That'll be a better argument than not doing it at all. And it'll be a better argument when they see a change in behavior if and when they come and inspect you for the prior year's 4473s. All Speaking of Puerto Rico on 11, does that go under the US side or the foreign side? Great question. It goes under the US side because Puerto Rico is a US territory under US government supervision. So I said, I don't know all the cities in Puerto Rico. I know there's some territories, some provinces, some towns, but I was told, again, I didn't get it in writing, but I was told that if we list Puerto Rico as the place of birth, the US city and state place of birth, it suffices. JC, any comments on that?
We just had a couple of inspections where Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands came up during the inspections in Florida, and the IOI actually said that you have to put the city and the territory.
Under the US side. It's not
Under the US side, yes. So
it's
you
not a
do,
foreign
so if
country.
it's San Juan, Puerto Rico, if it's, whatever US Virgin Islands, whatever town, you have to put both. So it is city and state, but in this case, it'll be city and territory.
Next question, if you get an electronic signature and when it prints, it is not good, can we have them re-sign after putting a single line through and date it?
Yes, absolutely. And what you should do is notate in block 32 that you had them re-sign because the electronic signature didn't capture it correctly, or it didn't look good, or whatever. However you want to explain it, just put that in block 32. That's one of those scenarios where you want to, okay, why'd they re-sign it wet ink? So
Write the story in box 32. Story box.
it doesn't have to be anything lengthy. One sentence will do.
How do we know if they are imported?
It doesn't say made in USA, or there's an indication anywhere on it that it was not made in USA. They have to mark the firearm where it was manufactured at.
Yep.
So
for the most part, long
you need
guns
to
are
look for it.
Yeah, for the most part, long guns will be marked on the barrel with a foreign, it'll be a foreign name with a country, along with the markings that show imported by, or another company name USA or US city and state, and imported, the word importer. So for I think this is Chris. So you're gonna have usually on the barrel on a long gun, could be on the receiver if it's an arrow type firearm, long gun. But then on a handgun, it's going to be on the frame typically. But you'll have two names. You'll have a company name, meaning a factory in a foreign country with a foreign country listed, along with an importer, a U.S. name brand that you typically recognize with the city and state of where they are located. Again, you have to look at the firearm. You're not going to find all of that information on a shipping label or a box or a carton. You have to look at the firearm for that information. Okay. And John, that's all the questions we had today. So fellas, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. We appreciate you visiting with us. Please keep in contact, call us if you need us, go visit our website. Some exciting news. We are redesigning our website. It'll be a new launch in the next month or two. We're excited about the information and resources we can provide to all of you and to the firearms industry through our new platform. If you got questions, call JC, call JB, or we'll see you guys next month. Watch your email. Usually the second, we're trying to for the first Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday of each month. Seems like the best day everyone can make a call like this. So thanks everyone. Anybody want to hang on, please do so. Otherwise, everybody have a great month.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Alex, you're out. Hey, Rob McNeely. He might be off. Alex, you still on? Yes.
There I am.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there's Rob. Hey, Rob, any news on supply chain? I know you're my contact on a lot of this.
Supply chain, I'm kind of, well, I'll put it this way. We just finished our Christmas shopping last week. No, I'm not joking. And why we're doing that is about 3 weeks ago, China shut their #2 port down because of COVID. And if you look at timelines on supply chain, that's a leading indicator, which means that probably circa another 2 months from now, 12 weeks from now, you're going to start seeing even more bare shelves than we currently have, because that's how supply chain works. So we already bought, literally bought all our Christmas shopping, and we're catching up on buying some automobile parts, because I don't know if anybody knows, but automobile parts have been a problem too, just like everything else. The one thing I can't get a grip on, and I've been talking to my smart friends, is why the microchip shortage. Because that's not a shipping issue, because microchips are valuable enough and tiny and light enough that you can airmail those things. Like a box, you get a decent sized box, you could put, $100,000 worth of microchips in a little box and just mail it or ship it on an airplane overnight. So no one I know can give me a reasonable understanding of why the microchips, and most microchips are made in Taiwan. And no one can explain to me why the Taiwanese problem with microchips, because that should have been, brought back up to speed. But in general, I think by the time Christmas comes around, I expect there's going to be a lot of, because the pandemic is getting worse and worse and worse, I would expect that probably by Christmas, probably you'll start seeing this by Thanksgiving. I think the supply chain is going to be a whole lot worse than it is right now. And I'd prepare for it. If I'm wrong, great. You're prepared. You're buying things cheaper now than inflation's. I think prices will probably be more expensive anyway. So even if you buy it now, you'll be better off. But I think I'm concerned that supply chain is going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, my financial advisor has an economist on retainer consultation. It said the same thing. The importation is, if you just look at the scales of business and the ports, I can't tell you about Taiwan and the chip. I heard it was precious metals. I heard it was the auto industry demand. US, they were making cars for a year, and then they tried to ramp up very quickly and just sucked up all the resources and precious metals and production, because I don't know, a car takes X number of chips now. And computers. I don't know about anything else specifically, but I just heard those two things. And COVID, obviously, production labor. So, yeah. The one thing I do follow is the COVID death number. Is the only number my doc friends say is any number we've been watching since the beginning, and the death rate is way up. So you hear that on TV now. You don't hear it like we did a year ago. You hear more about masks and vaccines than you do, but the death rate is very, very, very real. We're at peak numbers as we were in the almost towards the peak of COVID 2020. So,
here in Utah, we're a let it rip state when it comes to what we're doing or not doing about COVID. And we're already seeing it. Kids are dying now. So what's different this time? And I think COVID's going to end up being a lot worse, probably in the next 2 to 3 months. Primarily because, at least even in Utah last year, when the numbers were lower than they are now, they didn't have in-person schooling in a lot of the state for schools. And then a lot of people went remote work. So those things are good, not only for preventing the spread of COVID, but any respiratory virus. And by the way, my opinions about COVID have nothing to do with my opinion about government response to COVID or lockdowns. I think the government fucked us every step of the way politically, and I don't look at it as a political issue. I'm looking at things like supply chain and things like that. So just understand that, I'm not advocating for what government has done, but these issues are real.
I couldn't sleep. I was trying, but I gave up and looked at my phone and saw all the messages. I've made an appointment to get my card taken care of for Wednesday.
But anyways.
But I need to get the money back on my card from the thing first, from the
Who is it?
renter's insurance
Todd.
before I do that.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
So my take is this, because I look at the COVID numbers, at least how it pertains to me here in Utah, and we're a very red state when it comes to this. But what's different this year about COVID is, one is the new variants coming out are about 5 times more transmissible. They're more like measles level now, which is pretty interesting. But on top of that, what we're dealing with and what we're looking at is that the schools are wide open here and people mostly have gone back to work this year. So all the things that prevented COVID spread, meaning, and I believe the number one thing that prevented COVID spread last year was the fact that people weren't going to work and people weren't having their kids in school. Schools are the number one petri dish of all viruses and sicknesses because kids intermix all day long and then take them home with them. And that's where, and so what happens is the COVID measures work for things like RSV, which is a really lethal respiratory virus for newborns, and flu. But so what we're already lining up right now is that we're going to have a bad flu season and RSV season because we're just wide open now. And our numbers are way worse now than pre-vaccine rollout in Utah. Now, I just saw an interesting thing in Idaho, which is a state just north of us. The 11 hospitals in northern Idaho just decreed over the weekend that they are going to be rationing care in a triage format to give care to the most likely people they can help. So that if a patient has the most likely chance of success, they're going to get first. That's normal triage. That's normal triage in any emergency situation. But what that means is that if the doctors deem that you're probably not going to make it, or you're going to have a lower likelihood to make it, you're not going to get treated. And so that's 11 hospitals in Idaho right now that are doing that over the weekend. So that's a real thing, right? This isn't made up. This isn't bullshit. This isn't politics.
Right.
Like, this is an issue. And I think my big take on COVID long-term, again, not advocating for one course of action over another, but other than I think that this is an issue we should be paying attention to because it does impact things, is that there's an interesting chance that the longer this kind of COVID pandemic goes on globally, the greater chance you're going to get to a variant that will end up being more lethal. So the problem is it's becoming more infectious. So the people that say, well, we're just going to have to live with this, there is the odd chance that this might be a man-made virus that may not conform to our normal understanding how viruses evolve and mutate. But we know that in a year and a half, it's become 5 times more lethal, or I'm sorry, 5 times more infectious. Now, if you just ramped up 5 times more lethal than it is, that's catastrophic. And I think the longer this takes, we're going to get there at some point.
Yeah.
And that's my concern.
Yeah, no, great commentary. Let me bring it back to the firearms piece here. So we're predicting because of that and all the other things going on, we've got on the verge, on the horizon, we see civil unrest. On the horizon, we see a repeat of many of the issues we had last year. I'm hoping not. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a risk manager by career, but we're looking at stay at home. We're looking at remote working. We're looking at the economic piece of it. Are we going to be on unemployment stipends again? What's going to happen? I mean, this could be replay. Again, I don't know anything, but to your point, Rob, there's a lot that is happening real time that is just not being broadcast or publicized, and it's almost being minimized to keep the economy going. We see this as an economic move because no one wants to have a shutdown again.
No.
So,
the other thing I would look at from an economic standpoint that could affect guns as well, because most of us, good old Randy, but we know like a Disney or it's like a cartoon. So one of the things that's interesting, one of the things we know when the economies go down, right, is that people oftentimes will sell guns.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the first things people do when they get stuck. They got guns, they sell them. That will affect the gun market. So one of the things that we've been looking at as leading indicators, meaning things that happen months ahead of something else economically, is going to be the moratorium eviction that just ended, the fact that extended unemployment just ended. And I think this is key, is that the student loan repayments go back into effect the end of January. They extended that. That was supposed to happen in October. What that means is that I believe, based on those indicators, that sometime between first and second quarter after, like let's just say 3 to 6 months after all those things end, you're going to start seeing that manifesting through the economy. So with the student loans and why this is important, and a lot of people don't know this, but student loans have been completely shut down. Like if you had a student loan, you not only were not accruing interest, but you didn't have to make any payments whatsoever for the last year and a half.
Right.
And so I know lots of people in my personal circle that weren't affected by COVID at all, but just stopped paying their student loans because they took a vacation from them. But now when those kick back in, I think it's going to be a lot harder for those people to like get back into used to paying those payments that they've been on break from. And so I would expect by probably end of second quarter next year, you're going to see a lot of big changes in the economy. I'm not going to say it's going to be a doom or crash scenario. I'm saying is you're going to see a lot of things happen, and you need to be ready for economic changes because those are all leading indicators. And so my prediction is mid next year, you're going to see the economy shifting a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So Alex and I were talking this morning, and he's a new FFL. So the challenge here for gun dealers is I told the same thing I told Alex is if you can get guns, get guns. They are not going to get cheaper. They are going to get more expensive over the next year for all the reasons you just discussed. And the same thing with ammunition. We do have a source where, he's sitting on 500,000 rounds of 9mm, but he bought them at a premium. But in another 2 weeks, his price will be affordable for gun deal. I mean, he thought he lost his shirt on this purchase he made from overseas, but he's actually going to be okay. He's going to definitely be able to unload. It's all 9mm. If anybody needs it down the road, let me know. I'll put you in touch with him. But yeah, this is as I said, somebody said, and I keep hearing now. I'm hearing it's going to get worse before it gets better, but that can be applied to almost everything happening around us. So from a firearms perspective, I'm just going to wish you, I can't stay on much longer than here. I got to wish you well. I think the dismal side of the industry is just the supply chain side. I say just, but that's all of it. I know a lot of folks right now are still making money on guns. Those who have ammo, are making money, but we just hope that the well doesn't run dry, and we'll have to keep our fingers crossed. For good things to happen, obviously, versus all this negativity we're discussing. But I think it's real. I don't think it's conspiracy. I do think, Rob, what you're talking about is real. Does anybody else on the call have any comments for today? Want to share anything with the group? Thoughts, opinions?
Yeah, me and Rob emailed back and forth last time after our last meeting, and pretty much what he's been talking about going on in Utah has been going the same way in Texas with the triage care that he was talking about, because that was just being talked about down here because we have school districts, literally the neighboring town over, JB, I don't know if you're familiar with Richardson, right outside of Dallas.
Oh yeah, sure.
Richardson ISD is taking people and putting them back on virtual learning again because they're having so much COVID. The children's hospitals around here, they're sending kids to adult hospitals because of RSV, which me and Rob spoke about last time after this call. And they're having hospital capacity issues here that is literally putting it on the brink of triage care, because we're not at where he is up there in Utah yet, that's what they're doing. But many of the hospitals here are very fearful that that's where it's going to be very soon. And like he was saying, we got flu season coming up here, and we have COVID still running like crazy. And I don't know if anybody's heard about this new COVID variant that's being talking about, the Mu variant, or however it's said. It's spelled MU, but they have almost no information on that, and the vaccine provides almost zero protection towards it.
Yeah, that's Rob's point. If you know anything about biology, remember your biology class, viruses survive by mutating and evolving. And they'll, that's what I think Rob was elaborating on, is this thing's just going to, I don't think it's going to stop. I told people I know, I told them 2 years ago, I told them last year, I said 2 to 3 years. Now I'm saying 3 to 5 years, we'll be wearing masks, getting vaccines, washing our hands, sanitizing, until we actually get this thing under control. Because I don't think anybody really knows the truth about this. Well, somebody does, but they're not telling us.
Yeah, that's above our pay grade.
Yeah. So I'm going to bail out, guys. Listen, thank you. Great. I love to have one-on-ones with you. Catch me on a cell phone, catch me on Zoom. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next month.
Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Okay, bye.